you did your 1 year anniversary for Young Minds podcast.
Yeah.
You actually got to do a live show
Yep.
um,
hmm
on it was a Wednesday night, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I got to lead a Wednesday night, which was
Yeah,
insane.
and
We
so
had all the
that's
youth in there. It's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So going into Young Minds podcast that you
Yep.
have, I've been on it. I've listened to several of your episodes. I try to catch whenever I can. I do. I love, and I actually, I'll, I'll, I'll tell you about this after
hmm
we're done recording. But there is a lady that I actually mentioned you to. She is doing
Yes.
something. Did she reach out to you already?
She has not, but I know that you had mentioned her to me.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I already did. But so
hmm
no, I like having. I would love everybody to listen to Basically Biblical, but
Yeah.
I know that's not for everybody, and I know um, who you're trying to target and who you're making your content for is different than who I'm making my content for. So
Right.
really, the bigger thing is I want people to find Jesus, and I
Uh huh.
think
Yeah.
the stuff that you're doing is a good avenue for that. So what kind of got you started with the whole idea of a podcast and specifically
hmm
a Christian podcast and trying to really bring in this next generation and show them that because we talked a little bit about when I was on yours. I really think this next generation is looking for truth like no other generation has, and I think you're
Yeah.
really highlighting that with the people that you're bringing on. So what
hmm
really brought that up, put that in your mind?
So, funny enough, we've brought up a pretty good bit, but Cody actually, kind of helped me out with that. Because so I used to do, and we ain't got to go dig this up, but I used to do TikTok, but like in 2020, 2021. So
Yeah.
again, there's that creating content,
Yep.
so I think that's always been there. Um, but I met him on there, and then I was doing this video at the very beginning of the year that was like to thank or to congratulate this officer that I knew he was getting promoted. It was a really, a inspiration of mine. So I said, you know what, we're gonna get together a bunch of my followers and we're gonna do this video and whatever. Well, then I told people about it and they just didn't like they were not interested. They didn't send any like submissions or whatever. And so I was gonna give up on it. And then maybe just like send him a text or something. Well, then Cody, he DMs me and he says, "Hey, are you still doing this?" And I said, "Okay, if somebody in uniform is like DM me to do this, we're gonna do this." So it was back on, you know. And
Yeah.
he sent me the video, and we started talking afterwards. And then he was interested in operation and all that. So that's how we met. And then like not too long after, he started this whole, Of Sound Mind podcast, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. That's really cool. And so I was, because it's what he told me was the way he had people on was whoever asked was first. And so I was the first person to ask because I was his first guest on Of Sound Mind. And so I was like, okay, this is really fun to have these conversations and tell people stories and tell your
Yeah.
story. And so that's what kind of got me into it because I was like, I'm kind of getting tired of TikTok. I need a way out. What's the way out? And so that was my way out. Was God was telling me, "Hey, do this podcast, do it." And then I thought I was like, 'cause again, started with, and I sat on it for a minute. I was like, okay, well, here's Cody doing what for like adults, young adults, and then Donovan over here, he's doing it for anybody. Well, where's the young people at? Who's doing it for my age group? And nobody was doing it. And so I saw a hole, and so I was like, well, let's fill it, because at the time I didn't know Ben, Shelby from the Godcast, and so I was like, where is my people at work? Can they get content? And so that's what I started with. And I did a few where I just talked myself, like Donovan does it, but I didn't really feel like that was my format. I was like, this
Right.
doesn't feel right. I know people can talk to a wall and you can, you're passionate about it. It's great, but
It's not
that's
for
just not
everybody
me.
though. Yeah, it's not for
Yeah,
everybody.
that's just not me. I love the back and forth, and
Right.
so I think what really kicked that off was when I did a few interviews before his, but Pastor Robbie's at episode 15, I interviewed him, which I thought that was like an impossible feat at the time. I was like, this man's so busy, there's no way. He's got a
Yeah.
church of 900. There's no way I can get an interview with him. Well, sure enough, I scheduled an interview with him on a Wednesday night after he preached. So he preached and then talked to me. And so, he was probably really tired, but he sat down with me for 26 minutes, one on one, me and the pastor of my church, and that was such a cool thing at the time. I was like, man, this is wild. And then that's what gave me that idea to start going around. Well, what really did was after. So we started talking, and he said, why don't we do an episode? So the 1 year has been like a long time in the making, right? He said, why don't we do an episode with like the four main pastors? So him, Josh, Randy, and and Jeff, right? Well, I said, well, why don't I get their stories first so people know who they are, like I did with you, and then we'll do that later on the line. So that's what happened. I interviewed all of them, and then I started interviewing more people, going and going and going and going until I knew it. I'm on like 80 plus episodes, and I
Yeah.
haven't stopped. You know, and I don't really know what to call it, but man, it's like at least with the North Side, it's become kind of a I don't know, like a thing. It's become kind of like a movement type deal. Like people are wearing the T-shirts. I mean, and I've got this right here. People are painting the logos. I mean, like what in the heck?
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
something
like
like I'll say too, I've seen just from your social media posts and things like that or other people tagging you and stuff. Um
hmm
it's crazy the support
yeah,
that you've gotten from the church, and it's not like I don't want to sound like there are people that go to my church that listen to my podcast. Uh the associate pastor at my church is one that listens to
hmm
most episodes. And he'll talk to me about stuff that's on it periodically. But like, if I'm being honest, like, my target audience isn't really most of my church, and so I'm not really
yeah.
surprised that most of them don't. But, like, the level of support that I have seen
I
that
know
you're
it's
getting there
crazy.
is nuts.
I know.
But
Yeah.
I think it goes to show that you are, and especially getting high schoolers, like teenagers, to engage, which
hmm
is ridiculously hard. So the
Yeah.
fact that you're not only just getting them to engage, but really getting them to buy into this Young Minds podcast,
hmm
I think really goes to show like you're on to something. You're putting out stuff that they want to hear, and
Yeah.
I mean
Well,
you're
because
doing a
like it's
phenomenal
also
job
too,
with
it's
it.
like it's like, oh my gosh, my friend just got interviewed. Let me go see what their story is. It's like, and then they bring their
Right?
friends in, and then they come, you know. And what's great about it is like the T-shirt thing, which is a pretty new thing. It's exploded. Like I've sold about 70 something shirts in just a couple months. Like it's insane. Um, and I've done about 3 orders or something like that. And the T-shirts aren't they're going beyond um just my church. Some people in my school are buying them, teachers and students, and they're not even per se. I don't even know if they're like really Christian, but they're buying them, and they've got that verse on the back, and people are reading that verse. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, so you've got people who they may they may not exactly know what it means, but you know what? They may go look at it later. They may go they may go see what it means. They may go research.
Yep.
And it's Colossians 3:23 through 24, and I'm just going to paraphrase. It talks about working for the Lord with all your heart, and that's what I think the Young Minds podcast. I mean, because I won't lie, God makes me put a lot of work into this thing to be as consistent as I am. Like, I am on the month of May right now for recordings. Like I'm that far out right now.
Nice.
And that's what's so crazy. Um, and even through everything, I mean, the Young Minds podcast does not stop, man. I mean, we had a hurricane, and episode still came out. I've had technical
Yeah.
problems, and episode still came out. I mean, I've had rescheduling stuff, and episode still came out. I mean,
Yep.
it's crazy, and you are a big part of that with helping me get, um, the ones that I've had to connect with, and I thank you so much for that because I know
Yeah,
that,
no problem.
yeah, because some of these people I want to interview them, but they're not here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do it? And then, of course, there's the money thing involved. I'm like, why? Just make it free. I'm trying to do something good here. Ugh, you know. But
Yeah.
I mean, dude, really, this whole podcast thing, I didn't expect it to explode like it has. At least in my community. I mean, because I've interviewed other people other than just people at my church. I've interviewed people at other churches, interviewed other pastors at other churches now. Interviewed another podcaster that's around here. His name is Austin Neil Gregory. He goes to another church, and it's so cool because people are like, it's getting the word out. You know.
Yep.
About these shirts, about the podcast, and more people are leaving reviews, which I love the reviews. Like I love seeing that because like that's the only bit of like feedback I get other than word of mouth. Like and that's another thing too is at Northside. Because I know like with Donovan's, I love his stuff again, but like say if he has an interview, like say like Hovey, right? more than likely, unless he records with Hovey again, he's not gonna talk with them again, right? Whereas with these people, I get to tell them about their episodes. Hey, your episode's doing this. Look what God's doing. It starts a conversation,
Yeah.
and then like we get to build off of that. And I'm like, see, like this so and so like said this about your episode, or like like Pastor Robbie like this, or it's and so it starts a conversation, it gets people excited inside Northside, and then other people tell other people. Like I'll give you an example, like that Austin Williams guy that I interviewed here recently. He was told about from 6 people at DNow, not just me, that he needs to come on my podcast. That's what, and because he saw the shirts, and he also heard the word of mouth.
Yeah.
Because there was about 10 people wearing the shirts that day, and he saw it, and so it's just like, what has this thing become? I am mind blown by it.
Yeah.
God's like, what are you doing? I never expected this to go this long. And I mean, I'm almost on episode 100, and I haven't stopped. I mean, it's crazy,
And
man. And
it's
I mean, and I'm a senior in high school. Like, what? It's crazy to me.
yeah, the
You know?
fact that I mean, you're doing it, you're having to work around school schedule and stuff like that, and you're still able to get the stuff out, and you are consistent. You're every week you have an episode coming out. But no, it's been awesome to see the level of support, and I think to your point, I think it does good for people to hear that their story has positively impacted somebody else, and
Mhm.
with you bringing them on, they're able to kind of get their story out in more of an open way and to more people than they would ever really be able to just in casual conversation,
Yeah.
because chances are, even if you could get one person from north side and somebody else from north side hears it, the chances of them just randomly having a conversation in which they go that deep into their testimony is not super likely. I mean, it's possible, but then when
Yeah.
you take into account the number of people that are listening, like the chances of them getting their testimony that deep to that many people just in casual conversation is not super likely. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's definitely a benefit there. I
Yeah.
think great
And
great
I'll give
benefit.
you an example of that too. I had somebody. Her name was Stephanie Peterson. She has a testimony that I loved her episode. She was, I mean, as nervous as I'll get out to do it because her testimony is really rough. It's,
Mhm.
I mean, I won't go into the details because you can go listen yourself. But, um, she was so nervous. I mean, in fact, she wanted to be one of the first ones to record, but she chickened out. That was her words, not mine. And so we just eventually she's like, okay, let's do this. And we sat down. We did it there in October for Physical Abuse Month, and she sat down. I mean, this was how different it was. She wrote her own questions. I didn't even write them. I usually do, but I was like, you can write them. You can know what you're gonna say. You know, I'm flexible. You do what you need
Right.
to do. We're gonna get this down. And she did it. And she was, and then God really showed her what her story's done. It is one of the top listened podcast episodes I've ever done. Over 100 listens. I mean, and it just showed her what people really need to hear. I mean, because she was like, she really went deep, and because of her obedience and telling her story, look what God did with it. You know, and I'm not saying all of them have been like that. I mean, all of them are great. Like, I'm not saying that because all the stories have been great. They've been
Right.
wonderful, but God sometimes uses others more than like at that moment. Um,
And
and I
there's
was like, I told you,
Yeah, and
it was so
there's no
cool.
saying either, even if, someone were to come on and they talk and it only impacts one person, like you still don't like that's one person. Like that's
Right.
that's that's immeasurably huge.
Mhm.
So even one person impacted is amazing. Um
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. And I didn't. And one thing that the idea when I first came up with it was to only have young people on. The Young Minds podcast. But then I realized that's kind of impossible. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult because of the scheduling. It's actually harder to schedule a youth than it is an adult, which
Yeah.
is very funny, but it is like, because of school and everything.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have the adults come on and tell them their thoughts or tell their thoughts about, um, the youth today and what their advice is to young people. And that's really helped because a lot of, like, say, like, because how the push is. I mean, I know it's a push for guys too, but especially young women like to have great role models. In
Yeah.
like today's world, there's a big push for that. Well, because of me interviewing these amazing women at Northside, like the pastor's wife and Lisa Hannon, these young girls that are in the youth group, they go back and listen to them, and they're getting some great content. I've heard that, and it's so cool to have that, influence for young women, young guys, and young people in general, because it's working,
Yeah.
you know, um, and that's so cool because again, and they've gotten T-shirts because of it, and they just love wearing them, and I've heard like great feedback on them. They're super soft. I love, because there's this one kid, Carson. I've got, if he ever listens to this, I'm gonna got to give him a shout out. Like there was one time where I had to legit ask him. I said, "Dude, please tell me you washed this shirt. Like this is how much he was wearing it." I was like, "Please tell me you're washing this shirt." And he said, "Yeah, I'm washing it. I promise." I'm like, "Okay." I just wanted to make sure because like you've worn this like for the past like 4 Wednesdays in a row, so I just got to make sure.